If you don't choose to heal from them, you will find that the past story and the past teachings are going to keep revealing themselves in your present. And it's going to be impacting your enjoyment. And it's going to be impacting, how comfortable and safe that you feel with your partners or even with yourself. So many Christians still do not masturbate.
Welcome, beautiful beings, to season 2 of the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast with your host, Harrison Ma. This podcast sets the loving intention of creating the mystical space needed to pull back the layers restricting health, alignment, and love. Now let's walk you home to your cosmic spiritual heart space. I am back here today with a third time returning guest. I think the first third time returning guest I've had here on the show to talk about all things sex, religion, Christianity, and sensuality. Before we get into that, before we jump into all things, all of those beautiful elements tying together, I want to remind you that you're here on the Cosmic Love Antenna that holds the intention of pulling back the layers restricting health, alignment, and love. If you're new to my voice and the beautiful guest who we'll be getting into today, welcome. If you are returning, you're part of the family. I love you very much. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Remember that you can share this episode out into the podcast streets with everything that you gain from this. And remember that you can go over to Apple and Spotify and leave reviews if you get some insights and gems out of this chat today. I want to give the beautiful Heather a bit of an introduction. If you have listened to this show before, you've probably heard one of the episodes we've done prior. I would definitely go back and listen to those. But in case you're new to Heather's voice, Heather is a Christian sexologist. She spends a lot of time in this world helping people not just connect back into their divine sexual and sensual being, but also move through a lot of religious trauma that might have come up in their past that is blocking their beautiful natural creation and sexual energy. And today we're going to talk about the link between the religious and sexual elements, as we always do, but we're going to go a little bit deeper today into all things in the past, the ancestral link, and really what we can do about this. Heather, with all of that, welcome back to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
It's so good to be here. I love, this is like my favorite podcast ever. Don't tell anyone else, but yeah.
Aww, it's so sweet.
So, I mean, it's such an honor that I'm here 3 times, Yeah, so I'm excited.
I can't not, Heather. Every time we talk about these topics, we both laugh about it, right? We get so worked up in the best
yes.
in the best kind of ways, right? So
yes.
I can't wait to get into it. So Heather, let's just begin. Let's just jump straight in. I want to give just a quick little foundation here. When we last had a chat, this came up, right? This topic of the ancestral link with, sexuality and the religious trauma that can come up around it. And I want to put this disclaimer out there because I know that sometimes things can be taken the wrong way. We're not here bashing any of the beautiful religious elements. I know that Heather, for example, is still a beautiful woman of faith, and I have my own spiritual and mystical elements that I adhere to. What we are here to have a conversation about is the elements that are layered on top of many of we're going to be talking about the Christian ideology today, but many of the religious groups out there that cause a lot of disconnection, trauma, and pain. So anything you want to add to that, Heather, as a beautiful sort of, because I know that when people start to listen to these kinds of chats, there can be a sort of a disconnect because there's a fear that we're sort of pushing these group out the window altogether. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think sometimes too, when a listener hears the word Christian, they can tune out.
Yeah.
And they can automatically think, oh, this actually isn't for me. This podcast episode is not for me. So I'm just going to tune out right now. And I do want to encourage you, if that's you and you're starting to tune out, please be encouraged. While I'm a born again Christian, it doesn't necessarily mean I'll push my faith on any single person. Harrison has his own amazing way of connecting with God and source. And both him and I will never push our ideals. We are here to help the world heal from whatever type of traumas that you might have had, because we all have them in some form or another, whether it's come from religion or whether it's come from cultural stigmas or it's come from generational or society passing down on a belief system that says this is how it is. And so we just want to bring to you the openness and the possibility to you that you can actually believe something different if you want to. And God does give that right to all of us to question some of these belief systems that are put on us. So please stay tuned. We will help you to feel as comfortable as we possibly can. You will feel loved on. And, maybe you might even be a little more open to God as you continue to listen, because God is love and we are love, and we want you to feel the extension of love. And that is the whole point of us coming together now 3 times to, help debunk a lot of these things, ideals, so that you can feel more and more comfortable with your sexuality, whatever that looks like for you.
I love you, Heather. This is why you're back on the show, my friend.
Too.
It's such a
and that just literally that wasn't planned. That intuitively just came through. Yeah, right now. So I hope that helps somebody.
It does, and it sets such a fabulous foundation. So let's start with this. And what I'm going to say is I'm going to go back to one of the points that Heather just hit on. Even if you are not a practicing Christian, what we are talking about here today, it impacts you just from a statistical percentage, right? Just from a statistical lens. If you are alive right now in this incarnation that you are, and let's say that you have never stepped foot in a church, in a Christian church, despite that, I would lovingly assert that you still have Christian religious trauma in you. And that is what we're sort of talking about today, because in our lines, in our ancestral lines, there it goes back. And this is the first question I'm going to throw to you, my friend. There is a long history of this kind of conversation, and most importantly, this kind of religious trauma in each of our origins, right? Whether we grew up in Europe, whether we grew up in North America, whether we're new to the world in Australia, right? The colonies, there are big ancestral links to religious path. And we're just talking about Christianity here. We're not even talking about all the other religious elements. So I say that just for people to lean in today and to know that, okay, if you're not practicing right now, it doesn't mean that this conversation doesn't apply to you. It is a high chance it's in that background. So that's my question to you, Heather. How far do you think this goes back?
Man, I mean, it's possible it goes all the way back into the beginning of creation. God made us all human, right? And so no matter what part of the world that you live in or you were born into, there's still going to be, belief systems that have been passed down. And as you were talking, I started to think about how I'm over here in the United States, and our history, like if you go back into the history books, the whole foundation of the United States is built upon Christian beliefs. So as you're speaking, even though you might not have grown up in the Christian church, or you had a parent that was a believer that took you to church, or a grandmother or whatever, our country, and I don't know how other countries are, I can just speak for the United States, the foundation is built upon Christian belief systems. And, faith and politics have been woven so deep, into each other over the years that it's really, really hard to separate, those belief systems that have been put on us and then we're created as laws. So now here we are as abiding citizens, and we're having to follow a strict set of rules, strict set of laws, and we can actually get in trouble if we don't adhere to these laws. And a lot of those laws were built upon biblical belief systems. So yes, when you say it's in us, even though you might not have been, in a Christian atmosphere growing up, it's still in you, like you said, and there is going to be some form of trauma from that, and a questioning within yourself, or like even like a feeling of rebellion, against wanting to believe that, because, maybe you have your own set of belief systems and you're like, I don't want to believe that. That's not for me. So now maybe you formed your own set of belief systems and you're living, by those. But, it does impact our everyday world, how we raise our kids, how we choose employment, how we spend and save our money. All of those belief systems come from, the biblical background, and very, very strict, and some of them are not even directly from the Bible. They were made up by man, but then the man said they were biblical. And of course, if you're not reading the Bible for yourself, then you don't really know if it's true, and you can just automatically believe, when someone says, oh, this is, from the Bible or whatever. So
yeah, so 2 points here is one is the systemic nature of this in every facet of our culture. And yes, you are speaking from a United States perspective, but it's the same here in Australia. I know, spending a bit of time in Europe, there are many other spaces in Europe that hold that same sort of systemic influence of the church. I mean, there is a reason that the Vatican is I think it's either top 3, or if not the most successful business in the world in terms of wealth that it's generated, right? It's just because it's every facet. But what I would say to this is, just because it is everywhere doesn't mean you have to succumb to it, right? And what Heather beautifully just outlined, you have a choice. You have a choice inside of you of what you decide is your truth, right? And as soon as we bring conscious awareness to these elements, so everything that Heather just said, if this is new to you, then, and you're probably, as she said at the start, you might be getting triggered in this conversation. I would encourage you today, as we go deeper into this, don't turn away from those triggers. Don't push those triggers away. Don't numb them. Don't suppress them. Just be here with love, right? That doesn't mean you're taking it on. That doesn't mean you're changing your belief system. It just means that you are holding, as one of my mentors calls it, the tension of the opposites, right? You are now being the observer that is holding two alternative perspectives within your awareness. And then from that place, you can make a choice, right? Do I want to be in that same reality that I've been living, or do I want to do something different, right? Heather, how does this get passed on, right? And I definitely have my thoughts on this, but I'm wondering how you perceive this. Let me just give an example. Let's just say my grandfather grew up in the church, and he became very closed off. We're going to talk about the sexual lens today. There are many angles that we could look at this, but let's just keep it within the sexual. Let's say because of the church, he grew up and he sort of withheld himself and kept himself until marriage, and maybe did some of the practices we've talked about in other episodes. How does that get passed on in your perspective to me, the grandchild?
I mean, in the Christian realm, we tend to sit around the dinner table and have conversations over food. And so for us, my grandfather was a missionary, and he was actually a missionary. His whole family, actually, even my mom, was over in the Philippines for most of their life. And so he would bring, the good word, he used to call it, to as many people as possible. And so a lot of these thought processes we would, hear of, around Sunday dinner, with the whole family. And he would be preaching kind of, around the table and would be sharing his opinions and perspectives, belief systems. And he would say, this is what God says. This is what, this is what it looks like to be and live out a Christian, good Christian girl, good Christian boy, and those types of things. And so hearing those things and then, having like a different, well, that doesn't seem like what I want to do. But then I was like, but if God wants me to, and God, says that it's right, and this is the way to get to heaven, and I want to live with him eternally and all of those things, in the afterlife, then I would adhere, to them. So that's how it looked for us. But now his dad, and then his dad before, I mean, they all were in the church. Like my whole background, it's like my mom, her dad, so my grandfather, and then his dad, and his dad, and his dad, and his dad, all this line of preachers. Like, I don't even know how far back it goes, but all of those same belief systems got passed down. This is how it is, son. So then, okay, then the son grows up, and then to their son, this is how it is. So, who knows how far back, all of these things. I mean, that's why I say, I think it can go back as far as like to creation. Because even when you read the Bible, like Adam and Eve didn't know that they were naked until, they decided to go against what God said. Then they realized they were naked and they felt that shame. Right. And so then here comes God, and then he didn't shame them. They felt the shame themselves. They thought that he would be like so upset, that he would like get rid of the relationship with them. But that's not what he did. As a matter of fact, God took the time to knit clothes for them when they realized that they were naked, to help them, with the shame, now that they realize that. So, God is a God of love, and, his principles that he has bringing to us through scripture or through, meeting somebody in a mission field or however you hear about God. The ideal and the original intent from God is love, and anything outside of that is judgment, which then can form resentment, which then can lead a person to not want to be in the church and to completely walk away from God, which we've talked about, and all of that. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but like I think it can go back so far.
And it's important, Heather, because I have a question that bubbles up just for you personally here, but just to add to this, not only does it go back far, like you're alluding to, but even through a sort of scientific lens I can throw in here now, we know that there are studies being done that up to at least 7 up to 12 generations, the choices that individual soul made in that lifetime impacts the genetics and the expression of the child 7 to 12 generations in front of it, right? So this is even sort of a biological expression. This isn't just foods that we eat and, toxins that we ignore. It's also these belief systems and these emotions and these feelings and perspectives that tune our internal system that then gets passed on. So I'm interested, Heather, for you now, as the woman that you are, that's done all this work and, broken free of certain ancestral chains and sort of stood in your own power, what is it like for you now to go back into those same family settings where, I haven't asked you about your parents and your background. I assume that they are still in that same belief system and same way of being. How do you notice the dynamic now between your ancestral links with your family that's still alive and your belief system that you hold now and their one that they still have?
Well, my mom, when I was a teenager, when she divorced my father, she actually broke away from the church herself. So she has kept her faith very, very strong. She's very in tune with Jesus, and she prays, and her and I pray together on a regular basis over the phone. And so we're very faith-based. But when she divorced my father, and he was a very abusive man, she was told by the church, yes, leave. But then when she did leave, then all of a sudden those church folks or people, they decided to not be friends with her anymore. And, they kind of disowned her. And so she actually had that as like a form of abuse that she actually went through. And so she has not gone, back to a physical church. She chooses to listen, just like I do now, to people like Joel Osteen, T.D. Jakes, Stephen Furtick, people like that have a little more open-spirited type of teaching, in the way they present the word. My father, he grew up Jewish, and so he was, I think they call it non-Orthodox or something. Like he never really went to temple. We just practiced like Hanukkah, growing up, and so he never really like was strict in that way. He had some belief systems when we were growing up with my sister and I, where, we couldn't wear a bikini, like we had to cover ourselves up. And so there's a lot of things like that, get passed down. So both my parents don't go to like a physical church. I did for a very, very long time. I was very involved, very, very involved. Before I got married, I was a part of the children's ministry and then the singles ministry. And then I got married and then my kids were in the children's ministry. And then I was helping in the nursery and I was a part of the women's groups. And then as I got older, I got into the worship team and I was singing on stage and like all these different things. And I loved it. Like I was a part of it. It felt like a family until I started to have questions around the sex conversation. And so I would bring questions like this to the women's groups, which I think we've talked about this before. And the way that they responded made me feel so uncomfortable. And like, it wasn't something that should even be brought to this type of environment. And I used to think, why? Like, if God created sex and he made it for marriage and it's supposed to be good and beautiful and all that kind of stuff, why can't we have like a beautiful, loving conversation around it, especially if it's within marriage, and they just were not open to it. So that made me start to feel uncomfortable in the church. So I started to get my answers outside of the church. And I wish it wasn't like that, but that's how it has been. So when pandemic hit and there was no more church physically, I actually took that time by myself with God and really started to dig into the word more and, started to kind of redevelop my own personal, walk with God, because I had not gotten away, but I was more relying on what the pastors were saying versus having like my own personal daily walk. And so when they reopened, I was like, you know what, I just don't feel comfortable with the kind of churches that I have gone to. They're still very, very legalistic. And I've gone to the church that I was going to, and I asked them if they would be open to the work that I do, if I could come and actually talk to some of the women's groups or like a marriage retreat. And they shut me down faster than anything. I was like, so sad, because people in the church, they're like the number one, if not the second, on the list of divorce. And like the main struggles in marriages are sex or money. So why would you not be open to this conversation? It really confuses me. It baffles me that they obviously see this happening, yet they're not open to, someone coming in like myself that could actually, help. So, all of that to say, I just listen to T.D. Jakes and people like that myself, and I get what I need. And then I turn around and I give back to my community and to, my family when it's needed.
So I think, thank you for answering that, my friend. And I think a big part of that is what we talked about last time, is the pastors themselves and the communities within the systems. Our belief system is inherently closed, right? So when someone like you, a beautiful shining light, comes in and says, oh, look at all these alternatives that we can implement here, there is a part of them that sort of reacts to that. It's like, oh, this is breaking my tribe, or this is jeopardizing my belief system that's closed. So it's, and you've said this on the other episode, and I'll say it here, is we need love for these people. When they do have resistance and they do have fear, then when we face that fear with more fear, it only puts more separation. So I think a big part of the role here, and you show a good example of this, Heather, all the time, is when that separation comes up and that resistance. Okay, I understand it. I give you love, and I'll come back with a different angle maybe another time when you are more open, right? But let's I want to go back. So I'm happy that is sort of a step that you take even with the families and your family. What are some tips here? I want to, farm your beautiful mind around this topic within the ancestral lens. And because I'm feeling the listeners that are sort of wanting to know, okay, maybe they have shifted some of their religious beliefs and they feel empowered with where they are at now, maybe within their sort of the sexual view of their religious practice, they feel more empowered. And now they go spend time with their family. And maybe their family has the opposite view. They still have the old belief systems. What are maybe one or two tips here that you can share that the souls listening can implement with their family, with their ancestral line, to help them stay strong in their belief systems, but still love their family without resistance?
Well, I've actually had to practice that. So
I feel it. I feel it.
Yeah, I have a couple of tips for sure. I mean, the biggest thing I can suggest, to the listeners is to get so freaking strong in your own belief system that you are so empowered and you are so sure of yourself and this new belief system that you have built, that when you get around people, that you don't think maybe I am too much. Maybe I am speaking too much. Maybe they're right. When we start to question the growth path that we're on, just because someone else is uncomfortable, that's when we actually can find ourselves going backwards. So if your family is strong and opinionated and very judgmental, you will have to do a lot of extra work to build yourself up so that you have almost like this wall, this bubble around you that cannot be penetrated, because you have built yourself up so much that it just kind of goes, all right, that's fine. Like, it's fine that you say that. I'm still going to be me, whatever that looks like. And I'm going to be me full out without like worrying what other people think, caring what other people think, and not being a people pleaser anymore. Like, that just takes a lot of inner healing and work, and knowing that even though you don't go with their past belief system, that they still love you. And you can actually know, hey, my parents, they still love me. They still accept me. I'm still worthy of their love, even though I don't actually, adhere to their belief system.
Do you know what another name is for that beautiful wall that you just talked about? It's called a boundary. It's called a boundary, right?
Yeah, it's a boundary.
The way you defined it was beautiful, my friend. But that's the first thing that came to my mind too. That's the best tip I would give to add on to this, is learning to understand that when we can put up a healthy boundary, my favorite definition of a boundary is the distance between me loving you and me loving myself in a balanced way, right? That's what a boundary is. But a boundary, another thing that we could throw in here is, a boundary isn't solid. I think of a boundary like a part of our cell membrane, right? That is, it's transparent and things can pass through it, but we decide what is being passed through it. If it is a day, for example, that maybe I'm tired, maybe I'm stressed, and I have to go spend time with family, well, that boundary is going to probably be more strong that day based off where I'm at, versus a day where my cup is full of love and I want to go spend time with that family member. Now that boundary is going to be a bit more open, because now I want more things to pass through so I can love that person. So it's, I just want to empower people listening. We have a choice of what we put up, and know that your power, you decide, right? You decide what you let in and what you don't let in. right?
Yeah. And it's, sometimes those boundaries mean that you don't go and visit with them, or you don't, talk on the phone.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are periods like that when you are building yourself up stronger, where you can't actually have their influence until you've broken completely free, from those belief systems, and you've truly unleashed, the highest version of yourself. I had to do that with my mom, my mom for a while, because, she was my best friend growing up. So like a lot of her opinions and thought, on certain things I valued, but when I was breaking away from that, I had to actually take that time for myself. And so, give yourself permission to take as much time as you need, while you are building, yourself up. There's nothing wrong with that. Their love is still there, and you can come back, to them when you're ready.
Yeah. Heather, let's talk about sex. Let's talk more about sex here today. We've hit on that a little bit. I always hear
that song. Let's talk about sex, baby.
It plays in the background. We've hit on that a little bit, but let's go further into it now within this ancestral lens. And the first question I want to throw at you within this is, when we think of religious ancestral trauma from a sexual perspective, obviously the females along this ancestral past, I'm just going to say it, I think have had a worse go at it than the males, right? From a religious perspective, right? There's just been so much suppression of the feminine body in general, not even talking about sex, but definitely from a sexual lens. But my question to you, Heather, and I just want to sort of farm this from your experience with the couples that you see, is it only a female sexual suppression? Is there male sexual suppression along the religious sort of ancestral trauma route? And if so, what does that look like in your experience?
The short answer is yes. It's both male and female. Unfortunately, males are taught growing up, and this is a stigma, to keep everything private and to not talk about anything. And so as a male, you tend to suppress things even more on a greater scale. And then it comes out in anger, and it comes out in fear and drinking and taking drugs and all these different, things, because you have not been given permission to talk. That's why, mental health is on the rise a lot for men, because you guys have not been given that permission. So, I would like to give you permission to know that it's okay to speak as a man, and that your opinion matters. And that as a woman that's married, I respect your opinion. And I have to share this with all the males that I work with. I tend to work with couples. So I have a wife and a husband in front of me at the same time. And a lot of times the wife is talking. And then the husband just sitting there, and he kind of has a stoic look on his face. And you see his eye twitch a little every now and then, or his jaw clench, And I can tell, like, you want to say something, so then I'll have to put the wife on hold, because wives, we tend to, we're given permission to talk all the time, in class growing up and all that. So I have to stop the woman a lot of times and say, hey, I think your husband really would like to share something. What is on your heart, sir? What do you want to share? Like, what is your perspective on what's happening inside your marriage, and give them permission. And you should see, Harrison, I get goosebumps when I'm about to say, because when I watch the husband go from a stoic look on his face to me giving him permission, and then the tears that start to flow and the release, it is incredible to watch, because they have never been in a space with another woman that has given them, permission. And so once they have that, it's such a beautiful place. And then the wife is like, wow, I never knew that happened when you were younger. I never knew you struggled with that. I never knew you were open to doing this and this and this in the bedroom. If I had known, we could have done it a long time ago, So it definitely comes up. I think for men, you guys got a little more work to do on giving yourself permission to talk. Women, we tend to be very open, like I said. And we tend to wear our feelings and emotions on our sleeve. So a lot of times you can tell what's happening and what we're thinking and what our needs are and how you can please us and make us happy, as a wife. But there's work on both parts. But I would say the man has it harder for sure.
Yeah. So, all right, there's a lot in here, and I'm going to try and it's beautiful, Heather, because this is triggering a lot in me that I want to share. So this is wonderful. So the first thing I'm going to say is, if you're listening to this, maybe if you're a female, but definitely a man, you're thinking, okay, what is the connection to the sexual piece with what Heather just said? What is the connection between sexual function and sexual acts, between the expression of emotions? Well, definitely go back and listen to our, I think, number 2 chat, where we talked about one of the biggest blocks to sexual function in both men and women, but I'll speak from the male perspective. One of the reasons that we have, erectile dysfunction is not just because of the physical things going on, is because of that same emotional suppression, right? When we're not saying the thing, we're not letting ourselves release, right? Does that sound familiar in any other way? So this is a sexual challenge, right? This inability, this perceived inability to release and acknowledge our emotions from the masculine lens is a big challenge. And I'm just going to add on to what Heather's saying. To all the men listening within this, if you are in the religious world, if you have grown up in a religious household with this kind of suppression, I just want to reassure you, the more emotional you are, right? We are not our thoughts and we are not our emotions, but when we do allow these to move, we are being more of ourselves, right? That we are emotional beings. That is part of the reason that we're here, to experience all of life. And part of life is these beautiful emotions. Heather, my question for you, though, here is coming back to the religious paradigm. What are the teachings in your perspective that maybe sort of, exacerbate this inability to feel like we can acknowledge our feelings? What is there any teachings within the belief system that you think sort of create this sort of female or male that feels like they cannot express, feels like they cannot talk about these kinds of things, especially maybe in the bedroom?
Well, from a religious perspective, we're taught that men should lead, and that includes what happens in the bedroom. So that looks like the position that's chosen, and if toys are brought in or not, if we were masturbating in front of each other or not, like all of these different things, when we have kids, how many kids. So for a woman, religious speaking, for a woman that comes into a marriage, it's hard for us to actually voice what we want in the bedroom because we're taught to not voice, what we want in the bedroom. We're taught, from a practical standpoint, from other Christian women and our grandmothers, and then even men in the church. Men are leaders. What your man says goes. And like it's very like
taking action.
What's that word that you use? Is it patriarch or patriarch?
Yeah. Patriarchal. Yep.
Yeah. So like that whole thing is like passed down. So it's really difficult for women to have their voice. And then for a man, to have receive. His voice. Yeah. Well, not only to receive, but even for a man to initiate sex sometimes, that could actually be a little bit difficult too, because if you're married, and again, this looks different for every marriage. So this is not just one answer is going to fit all here, but for a man sometimes to initiate, if he's picking up any kind of emotion that's a negative emotion from his wife, whether, she's feeling insecure about her body or, she's busy with the kids or anything like that, and he doesn't want to rock the boat because God made him to be, make his wife happy and to please the wife, and don't want to rock the boat. So then a lot of times we get into these sexless, relationships because the female has this wall up and the guy doesn't know what that wall is. And sometimes he can think that it's him or insecurity or it's my body, or maybe it's because I didn't get it up last time and she doesn't want to deal with me now because what if it happens again? So a lot of these lack of communication type of talks do come from what we've been taught in the church, to be quiet about the topic of sex. And so we're very uncomfortable even talking to each other as husband and wife. This needs to change. Like, we need to talk about it more. Like, you can't over talk this kind of conversation. And also, we do need to realize that as the human experience, we do change over the years. So while maybe when we first got married, we're only into missionary or like doggy style or something, maybe like 5-10 years in, we want to have more adventure and we want to experiment more. But how are we going to know that we're open to adventure if we're not checking in and having these conversations on the regular, and sharing if openness has changed?
Oh, it's so important, my friend. I love you so much. This is such a powerful chat just for me, and I hope the listeners out there are getting some little nuggets here. I think that bubbled up as you're speaking, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see this in any sort of religious teachings, unless maybe you look at the sort of Buddhist perspectives. But in most of the Abrahamic religions, I don't see this. Is the idea that if you are a physical male or you are a physical female, you have both divine feminine and divine masculine in each of you, right? So me as a male, physical male, I have a feminine energy and a masculine energy. Heather as the physical female has a feminine energy and a masculine energy. So within that dynamic of the sexual act, we must understand that. So within your example, Heather, yes, the man can lead, but there's also a time for the man to receive. Same with the female. Yes, the female initially can receive, but then there is a time for the female to lead. Right? And
yes,
it's okay for that to be the case, right? Does that resonate, Heather?
I mean, even men would like their women to initiate because, you guys want to feel like you're needed too, and that you're wanted and desired too, just like, we do.
Yeah.
But when you said about the receiving, what's very, very interesting, I've worked with several males and they said they have a really hard time allowing their wives to give them a blowjob because of that. Because they're like, how am I supposed to just lay there and do nothing except feel pleasure? Like, this just doesn't feel right, for a lot of men. And so to allow yourself, to actually be on the receiving end, so be a good giver and be a good receiver, that does take a lot of work. It really, really does.
So having a little bit of a domino moment, that's a personal challenge that I have, currently not in a relationship now, but in my past, I'm just putting a light on it right now in this moment. That's definitely that specific sort of blowjob element. Whenever I was in a relationship, that was a challenge that I had. And what I would encourage people to do, and this is something that I've started to look at personally, is look at these belief systems, right? Look at these, again, these Christian religious belief systems that are in you, maybe unconscious, and this is the physical manifestation of them, right? Allow yourself the space to ask yourself, what teaching, what story in my head is playing that is promoting this physical expression? So in this example, not receiving, but then allowing yourself, can I make a different choice here? Is there something else that I could do? Can I be more open? Right? I know that's helped me a lot.
Well, when you said female and male energy, I just want to touch on one thing, if that's all right with you, because one thing that came up for me, like you say the wording feminine and masculine energy, but from a scientific standpoint, male and female have both male and female hormones in them. And so that is where we actually, scientific wise, so totally different than religion. If you just look at the science of how our bodies are built, God did intend for us to feel into, all those hormones. And when one or any of them are out of whack, one's low, one's high, you go and get the help. You figure out a way to balance out the hormones so that you then can actually tap into the feeling of giving, receiving, and you actually feel more balanced health-wise too. Like, your mental state, your emotional state, your spiritual state, it just all becomes, this more beautiful, balanced out way of living.
Heather, I think in our first conversation, we talked about, you gave the difference between, I think, was it sexuality and sensuality? I think you described the
Mm.
difference. And I want to bring that back in now as a way that we can start to heal our ancestral religious trauma that, again, might be very deep for a lot of us, as a way to start moving through it, right? Specifically the sensuality side of things. So I want to pick your brain here. What comes up? So if someone, let's use me as an example, right? Let's say that I have a ancestral religious wound around that receiving element. And I want to break free of that story, that belief. And I've understood by listening to you speak on that beautiful Cosmic Love Antenna podcast that sensuality can be a solution to this. What would you say to me, and how would we start?
Yeah, well, for those of you that are listening to this episode and didn't catch the last one, sexuality, I'll just tell you the difference real quick. So sexuality is more of the act of sex. So the physical, of the intercourse and the act of, giving or receiving oral sex, right? So sensuality is when we are tapping into all 5 of our senses. So we are actually giving ourselves permission to the feeling of, the sight, like what am I seeing right now? What's in front of me? And what can I appreciate from what I'm actually visually seeing? Whether it's, you looking at yourself in the mirror, self-loving on yourself, or you being with a partner, how can I appreciate what I'm seeing? And then, of course, what you're smelling, you're tasting, you're hearing, you're feeling, like all 5 of your senses. That is when sensuality, comes into play. And when we're using our senses, we're actually allowing the openness to, the healing. It's when we block what we're feeling, what we're seeing, what we're smelling, when we're not in the moment, that's when we actually block, the healing. So sometimes if we're living in the past, or we're fearing the future, and the future could be you're in the middle of an act with, someone you love, and you're already worried, what if I can't orgasm? Or what if I can't keep it up? And what if she wants to go longer and I can't keep it up? Or different things like that. That's also future. Okay. And, you want to be careful because you can, I like to call it future festing. So, there's manifesting, right? Which is the now, but you can also future fest something, whether it's good or negative, into your world as well. So, bringing in the sensuality piece and keeping on what's actually happening now, it'll keep you in your body, and it will actually, it'll actually show you. A lot of times when you're in your body and you're in the middle of an act with somebody, a sexual act, and if you're really in tune, you'll actually feel sometimes some of these resistance walls that will come up, or these triggers, and you can just ask yourself in the moment. You don't even got to really vocalize it to the person, but you can just be like, I'm feeling this. I'm sensing this. Where is this coming from? Do I need to believe it right now? Can I open myself up to believe something different? Can I open myself up to relax right now and to receive and it's okay to feel love and to receive love. I'm worthy of love. Like, you can do a lot of this mindset work right there, like right in the moment, and actually change, how you're feeling about the actual, act or whatever you're doing,
and the story that comes up. I love that, Heather. That's, I think, and you've shared a lot of profound things on these episodes, but I think that's my new favorite little tip and act. And I love future festing as well. I might steal that, my friend. I'll definitely quote you for that. But I think this is just so profound. I just want people to really hone in on this act, because it is in the present moment that is our reality, right? The future is never set in stone, and the past is in the past. And if you take a quantum perspective on it, the future and the past are always folding into the present anyway, right? So this is the only, it really is such a cliche thing to say, but it's so true. The present moment is the one that matters. It's the one that we are in, and the one that we need to pay attention in. But I want to, that act of presencing the belief and the story and the thing that comes up in the moment. What I would add to this, and this is probably something you do, my friend, but maybe you're not aware of it, is we can also breathe, right? We can also breathe into that tension, into that story, into that belief. So let's say that within the act, and I'm receiving a blowjob, and this story's coming up, and I feel this tension in my groin or this resistance in my sacral area. Well, what we could do is, on top of bringing the loving awareness to it, is we're going to be breathing anyway, most likely in the sexual act, right? So now let's do a conscious, intentional breath into that area, right? So breathing in and sending it to that space, that resistance. So we open it up, right? And then we can breathe out, and we're breathing out that resistance, breathing out that belief, breathing out that story that no longer is serving us. Does that resonate?
Well, the type of breath is really where it's at. You actually have to slow down your breathing. You have to slow down your heart rate, because you could breathe and you're hyperventilating type of breathing when you're tensed up, right? So that kind of breath is not going to serve you. It's breathing in for 4 and holding it at the top, and then breathing out and making sure it's leaving your stomach, and then holding it at the bottom. So it's that type of breathing that really slows the mind and slows the worry and slows the fear and lets you know that you can be okay, in that moment. And like, you're safe. You can actually say, I'm safe. Like, I am safe right now to receive, safe to be me. Like, this feels good. Let's keep this going.
And I love this topic. And this is this is an extra. If that's not good enough for you, if that isn't enough, and I don't think we've talked about this, Heather, too much, but I'm getting really on my journey at the moment. I'm looking into all things sort of tantra and the tantric views of sort of orgasms and all that. That breath practice will also increase your sexual energy, right? That's going to help. If you look into a lot of the tantric practices, one of the ways that we can exacerbate and prolong in the male body an orgasm and stop from premature ejaculation is doing that breath that she did, that Heather just talked about. So it has that extra benefit if that wasn't enough for you, right?
Yeah, and even for the female too, if you're struggling with even having an orgasm, slowing down your breath and sending your breath to your groin area and sending it with love and openness, that's going to help you to achieve, an orgasm as well.
Oh, love it. Going to be doing some breath work today. Heather, one more topic here I want to hit on as we sort of come to the conclusion of this chat is, again, coming back to the ancestral theme here. And this is, when I teach this with clients, this is probably the most important element of ancestral healing that is so empowering. And it's this understanding that when I, Harrison, or Heather decides to take on a element of our ancestral past, so let's use a religious trauma. Let's say whenever I touch myself, I should feel guilty and shameful, right? Let's say that is the religious trauma that's being passed on. If I, Harrison, or I, Heather, decide to break free of that story, break free of that belief, then I call it, we now become the breaker of chains. And what I mean by that is, we're not just breaking the chains for ourselves, but we're breaking the chains for our ancestral line, right? Our parents, our grandparents, the ancestors that have passed away. And we're breaking this and stopping this from being passed on to our children, right? We're stopping it now. Yeah. I'm wondering if you could speak to this, Heather. What does this bring up in you?
Yeah, I mean, it's generational curses. And God talks about them in the Bible. He directs it towards other types of generational curses, but there's still sexual generational curses that need to be broken, and if you don't choose to heal from them, you will find that the past story and the past teachings are going to keep revealing themselves in your present, and it's going to be impacting your enjoyment, And it's going to be impacting, how comfortable and safe that you feel with your partners or even with yourself. So many Christians still do not masturbate to this very day, and I get into some of these clubhouse rooms or some of these spaces and I bring this up, and there's anger that comes up, and it's this misplaced anger. And I know it's because they wish that they could. They wish that they could touch themselves. They have desires just like everybody else. But it's really until we tackle, how does God actually feel about these certain things that are coming up from our past? So where do we go if we have a question about how God feels? We need to go to the source, the written word. Okay. So go to the source. It's better than going to your friend or your mom or your pastor, because they will only give their opinions based upon their experience. If you want to know what the truth is, you seek it out from the truth giver. That's God himself that can be found in the word. And I actually I'll give you a verse right here. I always keep this near my computer. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. That's Genesis 2:25. So that's God's original intent for a healthy sex life, is that we are coming to the sexual experience with no guilt and shame. Takes work, but it can be done. And I'm proof of that. It took me all the way till 43. So hopefully it doesn't take you that long. I would love for you to set yourself free way before your 40s, if you can.
Oh, I know it will happen, Heather, because there are people like you in the world that are showing us what this example looks like, right? And I know that that's one of the things I'm so passionate about too, is this part of my work, this religious element, this ancestral religious element. Whenever I talk about it, as we've seen today, it just gets me so passionate. And I think a big part of it is that sort of helping not just myself break free from these chains, but helping other people do the same.
Yeah. Well, you actually want people to feel free, because you feel free.
Yeah.
And like I feel free. So that's the work that God's called us to, is now we want others to experience the same freedom that we're now experiencing. So we want to help you guys to no longer feel bound up in chains and to be in bondage, which you are right now, if you have not, chosen to do the work to release yourself from that.
Yeah. And this is a good point, because I want to add to this. If you are in the chains, right? If you are in the bondage, if you are within these beliefs, God, and I define God as love. That love is unconditional love, and that love, that divinity, that power, it does not judge. So if it does not judge, and it respects free will. So if you decide for whatever reason, let's say that it's not safe for you right now. Let's say you're in a relationship and maybe you're with a partner, God forbid, that's abusive. Let's say it's right now in this moment, it is not safe for you to break free of these chains. I also want you to feel that there's no judgment for that. There's no judgment. And this is why Heather just said these opportunities come back around, right? They come back around because there is no judgment. The universe is abundant, right? And if you deserve to break free of these chains, but even if for whatever reason you decide not to, you are not judged for that. And you will be given another beautiful opportunity to step into that power if you decide.
Right? Yeah, it comes up. Yeah, because that God wants you to feel it, man. He wants you to feel like, it just feels so good. And I was given many opportunities over the years, and I ignored them for a long time because I thought that God wouldn't approve of, me. So it took a long time for me to let go. And I actually have worked with women well into their 60s and 70s that have been able to release themselves within that time frame of their age. So it's never too late to allow this work to, bring you the sense of freedom to be yourself, and confidence and all that in the bedroom.
And I'll even go more spiritual and woo-woo here. This is also what multiple lives are for, right? We have different incarnations. This is one of the reasons, right? If there is a lesson that needs to be learned, and we so beyond the 80 and 90-year-old, even if we still don't get it, your soul is going to come back, right? And that's why these ancestral wounds are there, right? They're there to give us multiple opportunities to be that beautiful breaker of chains, right? That we deserve to be.
And if it's not incarnation, it could be the passing down. That's why possibly it's staying so long in the generations, because the next generation hasn't learned that lesson yet. So now we give the next generation the opportunity.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, down the mother line or the father line. Yeah.
Yeah.
Heather, I love you very much. Thank you for. I think I've said that 3 times. So I think that's this is the most love.
Harrison loves Heather.
Yeah, we're going to keep a tally. We're going to keep a love you tally. Heather, as always, before we finish now, I want to give you opportunity to really speak about what you're doing in the world for people that have listened to you and have listened to you on the show, and they're pulled to your heart and your energy. What do you have going on in your world? I know you have a book.
Yes. Oh my God. Well, actually, it's going to be published on August the 8th. And it's actually called Why Doesn't My Husband Want Me? And it's a beautiful, beautiful real life story about my own marriage and how we overcame 12 years of sexlessness and how we did that. And I really want, to bring a voice to sexlessness, because so many of us are stuck in that and we have no one to talk to and no change is happening. So I wanted to help you guys with that. So that will be available on Amazon on August the 8th for purchase. I also now am booking speaking gigs. So I'm super excited about that. And I'm looking to speak at singles retreats, premarital retreats, or counseling sessions, marriage retreats, different types of retreats within small groups or big, churches, where I can actually help to bring a conversation like this one to help destigmatize the sex conversation, so that, couples can be helped more in their marriage, to bring more of that emotional intimacy back and keep the connection strong, and not allow the enemy to have a foothold in the marriage. So if you hear or know of, please reach out to me on Instagram, Sex Coach Heather, and I would love, love, love to be a part of your next event.
Beautiful. As always, wonderful listeners, if you want to connect in with Heather too, I'll put all the details, the links, the book, the connection to speaking in the show notes. So just click on the details of the podcast and you'll see the links to there. Heather, thank you for spending time with me today. I'm going to say it one more time. I love you very much. I appreciate the work.
I love you too.
I appreciate the work that you're doing in the world, and I'm sure we'll do another episode very soon. Beautiful listeners out there in the listening world, thank you for giving us your ears, your heart, your attention. If this episode brought you some love, please share it with someone that you love very much. But until next time here on the Cosmic Love Antenna, we wish you a wonderful evening, morning, and night, and we'll talk again very soon. Bye, everyone. Before I leave you today, beautiful beings, I'm so excited to share a special announcement just with you. On the 20th to the 23rd of April, 2023, I and a fellow guest of the show, the beautiful Ali Paws, will be hosting live in Tulum, Mexico, the Cosmic Heart Tour. If you listen to this podcast week to week and you resonate with my frequency, with my voice, with my love in any of the topics I share with you, then most likely it is time for us to connect and heal in person. So I invite you to join us in Mexico. Join us for some meditations, activations, yoga, cranial sacral therapy, a book release, a live Q&A, poetry, and so much more. These spots are going to fill up super quick because our intention is to make this exclusive and intimate. So please DM me Cosmic Heart Tour on any of my social channels. That's Cosmic Heart Tour on any of my social channels, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and we'll book in a meeting so you can join the love. I'm so excited to connect with you in the flesh. Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna with me, your host, Harrison. If you gained value or this episode hit your heart, please remember to share this out with a friend, a family member, or a lover. You can also leave your love over on Apple reviews and Spotify star feedback, and this helps me spread my frequency to more souls in need. Finally, if you want to connect with me deeper, want to reach out, interested in coaching, please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Harrison Mar, Mar spelled M-E-A-G-H-E-R. Sending you so much love.
Electricast.